what are the sort of differences between NFRD and the proposed CSRD, and what are the sort of timescales and the numbers we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few kind of like differences. I mean, I think one is the scope of the CSRD, which covers kind of a wider range of kind of issues, again connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. So the scope of the CSRD is different. It also includes evaluation of kind of the business model, strategy. It's got a forward-looking focus as well on it. So it includes transition plans, key targets, kind of ESG targets, a range of different things. And it covers, kind of anti-corruption. It's got sort of human rights, social impact, as well as environmental kind of like impact. So in many ways, the scope of it is different. As I mentioned before, it's really tied in with the EU Green Deal. So it's aligned with a political kind of like series of transitions that actually goes on. The other thing is the types of organization it was kind of like linked to. So the non-financial reporting directive was relatively focused on a particular group of large organizations. In 2025, all of the companies that are currently reporting on the non-financial reporting directive have to kind of like to report according to the CSRD. It's a larger, more comprehensive set of kind of like data points. Then we kind of move on to 2026, where virtually all large kind of companies based in the EU and operating in the EU. And large is a sort of like a balance sheet of about 220 million euros and a turnover greater than 40 million euros. And over 250 employees. It's one of these size tests that you've got to kind of qualify for any two of those three kind of like issues. So it's based on asset base, based on your turnover and your employee, and you kind of pick any of those two match. You're a large company, and then you need to comply by about 2026. And then perhaps the bigger move is in 2027, when almost all listed small medium enterprises in EU regulated stock exchange are then going to require. That's a big shift, because then we're talking about moving up to possibly about 50,000 companies needing to comply with that. But they're not finished there. They've then got another stage, which is, for 2029, it includes any company that actually kind of like has a significant operation in the EU, even though they're not based in the EU. Now there you're kind of like you've got a different set of qualification. You must have at least one subsidiary or branch operating in the EU territory. And if you like, the overall turnover is around about 150 million euro. So it's like big companies, but it's for their operations in EU. So if you're based there and you're listed on a stock exchange, you're going to have to comply. If you're operating in the EU and you're a large company, you're also going to have to comply, even though you're kind of not necessarily based in the EU or headquartered in the EU. If you operate in the EU, by kind of 2029, you're going to have to prepare these reports as well. So you can see it's much more inclusive in terms of the types of information that's required. It's also much more kind of like inclusive in terms of the type of organizations that are actually going to be there. We're moving really from large EU-based financial kind of institutions to any company that's really listed and operating in the EU territorial space. So that's something, to be considered for UK companies. They're not exempt. We've kind of left the EU, but if you have a substantive part of your business, which a lot of UK businesses did, they maybe set up a subsidiary kind of on the continent, to allow them for it made very kind of like good business sense to do that. That part of their business could well be exempt, particularly if it's set up as a separate company. Then it can, and it's listed anywhere, then it can actually kind of fall within the remit. The qualifications is a little bit complex. It's size-based, and there's different timescale. And like all things EU, that may change slightly over time, because all this needs to be integrated. This is the EU have issued the CSRD. It needs to be enacted within national government's legislation and adopted within the kind of next, I think, 18 months. So there's there may well be slight variations in different nations depending upon their political process and the legislative agenda they've got in these different countries.